So good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me on this second Zoom. I always get really excited when I invite some people to come along and have a chat about anything that they want to chat about. So today I think is really important, and today is your platform to be able to speak about or say anything that you would like to talk about within this time frame that we have. So maybe my opening question to you all is, what would you like to talk about today?
Hey, G-Mann. One thing that when you were talking last week, and we talked about the numbers that they talk about in this pandemic, and relating to mortality rates, and I'm still curious, and I haven't found anything because those are all dated numbers and they won't be out for a few months, to see how numbers attributed to COVID-19 deaths affect what would be normal mortality rates, for other things like influenza, pneumonia, heart attacks, natural causes,
I think when you talk numbers, they're really difficult. What I'm going to pull up is I'm going to pull up something that a mate of mine sent me. This is the numbers that was sent to me. It says the average number of deaths per day in Australia in 2019 was 438 per day. The average number of COVID-19 deaths per day in Australia since the first one that we had is 0.97 per day. And the question he asked me, is it worth it? So when somebody sends me figures and numbers and statistics, I kind of want to cross-check them or cross-reference them to see if those numbers are correct. And I went on to the government website, which is the coronavirus C-19 current situation and case numbers. I went onto that site and I confirmed it for myself that was exactly right. So Mark, what you're saying is that I think the confusion is that a lot of people know that they're hearing these inflated numbers, or whether they're numbers and whether they're correct or not. One of the things I've also wanted to really confirm is that I know I got the numbers wrong last week when I said something like there's only been 2,000 deaths in the UK. Was that the person piped in and said not 2,000, 26,000, and somebody else piped in and then said 30,000. My question to you is that if there's been 30,000 deaths in the UK, and I think that's a horrible number, a horrible, horrible number, are all those deaths in the paper being advertised as, like when I open up my newspaper, it'll have, the births and deaths section. Is there a births and deaths section in your paper that says that here are the 30,000 people that have passed away? Where are all those people? Where are they being buried? It's horrible to think of these people dying and no one's recognizing these people. 30,000 deaths in one place is a horrible number. Where are they? Where are they being hidden? I suppose they're in these stadiums that they said they were going to put them in, but where are the numbers? And so I agree that, yes, there are definitely deaths, but I hear these numbers and they're really freaking me out, man. They seriously freak me out. So what's your response, Mark?
Well, they freak me out too. And you see an odd report about, refrigerated cargo trailers, lined up by a morgue and, temporarily holding bodies. Like you said, who are these people? Are they just storing them, or are they actually returning them to the family to be buried? I don't hear any stories from funeral homes overrun by
numerous amount of people. Yeah, I get you. I think that's the question that people are asking. May I ask, just with the people who are on here at the moment, horrible for me to ask this question, but has anyone here lost anyone to COVID-19? So I'm getting a lot of head shakes here. Does anyone here know of anyone who has COVID-19? So Tom, you do?
Yeah. And G-Mann, just real quick, I don't know if you noticed, there was two people who said they did raise their hand saying they lost two people. I don't know if you saw them or not.
Okay.
But anyway, there was like great concern of how many people were going to school and maybe interacting with her, and she could have been spreading it too. So that was like a concern within our community. In my school that I teach in myself, we didn't have any cases. How
many's at your school?
We have 1,200 students, and there's about maybe 250 staff. So quite a few. My district's huge. There's over 10,000 students. In terms of like the local community here, where my kids go to school, like I said, I think within Monroe County, there's 77 cases, I think, last I knew. But we have a considerably large population. I think we're close to 250,000. Upstate New York, that's where I'm from. We don't have it as bad as downstate where New York City is. Obviously that's where the big focus is in my state. Between like where we live in Rochester, there's Buffalo on our left, and we've got Syracuse on our right. Those cities, they're kind of in the same boat that we're in. We're all locked down, obviously, but we don't have the huge numbers that New York City's having. Like you're kind of pointing out, G-Man, they were showing caskets, like they dug this big trench, and they were just putting caskets, wooden caskets, with bodies apparently in them, just stacked about, I want to say 2 rows, 4 deep in terms of height.
And how undignified is that?
Right, exactly.
How dignified is that? If that was my loved one, and this is what they're showing, but I'm thinking if that was my loved one, and this is how they're treating my loved one, where I know who she is or he is, I know who they are. Why would I do that? Why would I allow that vision to happen? Or is it just a propaganda piece of material?
When I saw that being, videoed and put on the news, I just sat there saying to myself the same thing. I'm like, how are these people not, I get maybe they can't be there right with them when they're passing away, but once they pass away, how are they not getting these people, within their own casket, having their own services, having their own burials? But again, who knows how many of them could be homeless or how many of them could be, unfortunately staged just for the camera, which is sad and pathetic. But like I said the last time.
And it's interesting here. I think the numbers that have been raised: 20 people at I think it's actually 20 people at a funeral and 10 people at a wedding. So my suggestion is get married in a chapel and host a death, because I think most marriages might be like death anyway. Sorry, Andrew. Can I bring you into the conversation here as a young person? And it shouldn't really matter whether you're young or whether you're elderly, but can I get your perspective of where you're at and what your thinking is from a millennial's standpoint?
Like when this was all first coming out, I was initially kind of like, okay, this could be scary, right? I'm part of a fraternity. I live in the house, and we completely vacated the property for most of the people. There's 4 of us that stayed behind. I stayed because both of my parents work in healthcare. It's a town 2 hours away from here. I was afraid they would get it and then I would get it. And then as time went on, it became more and more clear, like it's really not been as bad as people have said it was. My roommate, who is originally from Illinois, was super worried that he was going to get it. And both of his parents were like, why are you so certain that you're going to get it? Well, when he went home, his dad had been basically confirmed to have it. His dad didn't really have any severe symptoms. He himself didn't really have any severe symptoms. The question of like, how bad is this really? Obviously comes to mind.
Can I ask you though, what's your perspective though with the pandemic? There is going to be a line in the sand here that I want to draw. On one side of the line of the sand, we have a bunch of people that will say this is real, it is scary, it is something that needs to be contained. We need to shut everyone down and lock us all away and keep us all safe so that we can prepare ourselves to come back online. That's one side of the line. The other side of the line says there's more to this than meets the eye. This is a plandemic. We know this is starting to happen. There are so many videos out there now that starts to talk about what's happening in the next 10 years. How did we know that this was going to happen? And now we're starting to talk about a second wave of this pandemic happening. So what's your viewpoint with this, Andrew? Which side of the line are you sitting on?
I think it's kind of a mixture of both. Like, obviously, we don't appear to have any way to work with this. Like, this seems to be the first time that we've ever actually encountered this. At least that's what our government officials would want us to believe. I mean, if we look at how these flus have been dealt with in the past, it's not been as outrageous of a reaction. From what I can tell, the only real concerning part about this is its infectability. And that could also just be because there isn't a herd immunity. So it's going to be really a firestorm at the beginning. But then once some people have some immunity to it, it's going to manifest itself like a normal flu. I guess I don't know where I end up on that.
So, Arthur, I think you had your hand raised. Did you want to add something to the conversation?
What Andrew was just on about really struck a chord on what I was going to talk about, because I think in the past we've had things like this come up, but we've been able to sort of opt out of the mainstream view on what it is. Because me personally, and you obviously remember the riots that went on in East Timor years ago. Well, I watched a film where they were burning a really big Union Jack, and it really upset me, because I thought, why are you burning my flag when we've done nothing to you? And when I actually saw the actual thing that happened, it was the biggest Australian flag you've ever seen in your life. But they only focused in on the Union Jack, and I realised just how easy I could be manipulated. And so I opted out. I stopped buying papers. I didn't watch mainstream news. I'd listen to a little bit on the radio, but not much. So what I understood from the world came from YouTube and social media, and you were able to opt out of the mainstream. But what they've done in the last few months is they have taken away that option, which if anybody's seen, I've got the name on it, if anybody's seen the documentary, The Great Hack, you know how they found out how they could reach what did they call it, the 15% or something, which I was one of. So they found out how they can reach us, and now every little thing is in your face all the time. My son, who's 12, all he watches is YouTube. And when all this started, I tried to reassure him that, we'd be all right and we'd get through it, because we've got through things like this for years. And he phoned me up at work one day and he said, Dad, on the YouTube feed, the news part is now not a separate tab. It's on the main page of the app. Can you take it away? And obviously I couldn't. So what they're doing is they're taking away our ability to opt out of any stuff that's shoved down your throat. So it's like a perfect storm why people think like they do. And if you're of an age like me, I'm 52, I've lived through the IRA and Islamic terrorism and every other sort of terrorism and Cold War and everything. And you sort of get a feel of what's going on, where now, like the likes of my son, he's on YouTube, but he's on no other social media. So he's able to listen to what we say and take a balanced view from both sides.
It's interesting. It's totally interesting what you say. It's like product placement in a shop. It's product placement in a shop. If you want to get your milk and the important items that you always need, they're always at the back of the shop. But if you want to feed people crap like lollies and milk, little treats and packets of chips, they put all the crap at the front of the shop. But the important things that you need are at the back of the shop. And they're doing exactly the same. This is the psychology of people work. Keep people away from the important things so that you have to go search for them. But let's put the crap in the front of the shop. Does that make a bit of sense as a good analogy?
Yeah.
H, I want to bring you into the conversation. Oh, go ahead.
Well, all I was going to say, the main topic I was going to bring up tonight was it frustrates me when people can't see what's going on. But watching your video from the other day about the young lady who got arrested in Australia with her child, I only saw the second part of that video. So I was thinking, she's done nothing wrong. Why don't they leave her alone? Well, she didn't really do anything wrong, but they only asked for a name. So if they'd give her a name, then perhaps it wouldn't have happened like it did. You know what I mean? Sure. So again, I was manipulated, but from the other side. So it can happen either way.
It certainly can. H, can I bring you into the conversation?
Sure.
You had your hand up. What would you like to add?
Okay, so I mean, I did before because you were talking about the numbers. What you need to know is that with viruses, everybody should know, I'm probably, a person who works in medical research. Virology, you can work out how fast a virus multiplies. And if they hadn't shut down, I mean, I could send you the figures. It would have been 1 billion cases by the end of May. that was based on the infection rate and how it was growing. This is why they freaked out at the beginning of March. But when you're talking about deaths, the death rate from this is around double at the moment in every country due to COVID-19. That's the numbers where you said, what's the normal death rate and how is it affecting? In the UK, it is almost exactly double the normal death rate for this time of year. If you really want to see something which would hit home, and this is why the world has panicked, is that normally when you have an infection or a virology outbreak or a pandemic, medical staff are not affected because they're usually vaccinated against what the pandemic is. There is nothing for this particular disease that they can be protected by. Medscape has a list which all the hospitals globally are sending in the names of their doctors, nurses, frontline staff who have died due to COVID-19. It's got their names, their ages, what they were, and it's an in memorandum site. It's currently at over 1,000 medical personnel globally have died. And one of the things that the UK, I think, gets this across quite well, Arthur, if he's in the UK, he might agree with me, is that a lot of this is to protect the fact that if the medical system has all these people coming in like they did in Italy, they're not going to be able to cope, and the doctors and the nurses will die, and then what happens? Italy's lost nearly 200 frontline medical nurses and doctors. The UK's lost over 100.
Can I ask you, these numbers that you're giving me, are these people, have they died with COVID-19
yes,
or
they
from,
have. Yeah.
or from COVID-19?
COVID-19 deaths, yeah.
With
particularly in the hospitals.
No, sorry, I just need to jump in.
Staff.
Have they died with COVID-19 as part of maybe a comorbidity that they had, heart disease, lung disease?
So a lot of them were healthy people. You look at their ages, they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s.
So when you say a lot of them, has that number been dissected for us all? Is the number saying it's 60% to 40%? I mean, has it been dissected? Because what we're getting as general public is that we're just going, oh, okay, here are the numbers. The numbers just relate with the people who have died with it and have died from it. What would be important for us is to know the exact numbers so that we can sit back and go, oh my, this really is a problem. But we're not getting that. We're getting, if my father was to die tomorrow, I would say he's only going to die from whiskey poisoning. Seriously.
Good way to go.
Say again?
Good way to go.
Good way to go. And if I was to go tomorrow, it would probably be from a bike accident. But if I had any sort of flu-like symptoms, because we can't, the testing system really here in Australia isn't the best. I don't know anyone that's had the test. And I've been to the hospitals and looking, and they're just pointing things at your forehead to see if you've got a temperature. So I think that's where the confusion is. It's not so much that you're wrong. It's that people are saying, well, give us the correct figures so we can make our own choices.
But these should all be people that have been tested, because COVID-19 is a reportable disease, and that's globally. So if somebody dies of a disease which you need to report, that death is attributed to it. One of my big problems right now is that I work in drug safety, which means that, I'm having to get people to differentiate whether somebody who's died in a clinical trial or on a drug which doesn't yet have a license, did they die from their disease? Was it anything to do with the drug, or did they have COVID-19?
You make a really good point. You make a really, really good point.
This is something which has doubled my workload in the last 2 or 3 months.
And I want to ask you, I'm going to move on to firstly Gary, and then I'll move on to Arthur. But I do want to ask you, H, why are there so many nurses and doctors coming out in opposition to what you're saying? So I'll get back to you. Have a think about that. There are so many.
I can answer that, no problem.
Yeah, I want to know why they are coming out. Why the medical profession? Some of them are coming out and they are poo-pooing. See, that's my English language for you. They are poo-pooing what you are saying, and I want to know why they would say that when someone like you, who comes on here in the medical profession, is saying exactly what I think, maybe the majority of nurses and doctors are saying.
This is all ridiculous. And, I don't care what the numbers say, because if you believe what they say, you're just about as crazy as they are. You can't trust anything anybody says anymore, from the government, from the media. The media is just terrible. Absolutely terrible. Somebody needs to put a stop to them. Seriously, like everybody needs to stand up and tell them to shut up, because it's really bad. One minute I hear one thing, I change the station, and the next station saying a completely different thing, and it's bad. In the county that I live in Pennsylvania, I've got supposedly 428 deaths or 29 deaths. To be honest with you, that's really not that big if that number is true, comparatively speaking to the flu. So, you know, and I don't believe that number is very true. So
hey, hold your thought there for a moment. Hold your thought there for a moment, because I think this is the confusion. It's like an H will be sitting there going, she works in the medical industry. She sees it quite differently to what we see it. And maybe they're shielding us from it because they don't want us to be disturbed by what we are seeing. It's best off that we don't show you the disturbing images. So what we'll do is that we'll just hide the disturbing images away from you, but we'll give you the numbers. So maybe that might be the reason. But I know that's why people become skeptical, is that we are adults and we're human now. And I'm sorry, we're human and we are adults now, and we can handle distressing stuff. We watch stuff on TV every day. We see things that are quite distressing. We see the blue tarp put over the person. We see the body bags being carried out. So we're adult enough, but maybe they're trying to protect young children from seeing some of those horrible images. I don't know. I don't know what that answer is, but I'll get back to H for that response. But Andrew, you wanted to jump in there and add something.
Yeah, so if I remember back in March and maybe early April when we were all kind of learning about this and everything was coming out, a YouTube channel called CheersRudi that does a lot of really well-researched videos put out a video basically explaining how COVID works. And so when it comes to deaths with COVID or deaths due to COVID, it's kind of hard to be able to place that. I've just kind of realized that because the COVID virus, just its main purpose appears to be weakening the immune system so that other bacterial infections or viruses can come in and then like either attack the lungs or attack whatever part of the body that it's damaged. And so when we see deaths that are due to maybe influenza or pneumonia that were paired with COVID, it's going to be really hard to try and decipher whether or not the COVID had a major role in that, because it could have created an opening in the lungs for pneumonia to come in and actually wreck the system, or pneumonia could have already been in the lungs and you know, maybe COVID didn't help it much, or maybe it didn't really have anything to do with it. But we're going to have a problem trying to decipher those out. I still think that by and large, for people that don't necessarily have these bacterial infections within them already, or they maybe don't have the viruses in them, they're not really going to have a severe reaction to COVID. It's also dependent on whether or not the virus can get into like the deep lungs and not stay in the upper esophageal area. I'm not sure. I actually might have some more information on that. That's just from what I've collected from that.
Thanks.
You know, I think one of the big problems is, I mean, we all know doctors who can't explain something to you. They say, here you are, here's some pills, go away, take the pills. Scientists and medics are really not very good at explaining things sometimes, and I think that's something that goes with the scientific personality. And I can see ScoMo, Boris Johnson, Donald Trump, they've got advisors who are probably saying, we've just met the inflection point of where exponential curve onto where we go to logistics, therefore we're going to reduce our P number by doing, and you know, people get lost. They don't understand that, and nobody should expect them to. I think scientists have this superior attitude sometimes where they think, well, we know it, it's all proven, you can't lie with facts. And because everything has been proved, peer-reviewed and whatever, they don't explain to the lay person because they don't think they need to. It's like, it's almost arrogant sometimes. And I think that doesn't help the situation. But to answer those questions, every death does have to have a reason. It has to go on that death certificate and to, you know, the bodies. So the doctor treating that person has to decide what killed them. Somebody said earlier about somebody with cancer who had COVID and it went down as COVID. If that person with cancer was hit by a car, it would go down as being hit by a car. The fact is that people can see the obvious, but sometimes doctors have to make that decision of what actually killed them. Part of my work is based around what actually killed people. So those decisions are made by doctors, and you know, we do have to trust the doctors that are looking after us to have put the right things on our death certificate.
H, can I ask you, do the hospitals benefit more from a person being told that they have, or a person being noted down as dying from COVID-19 as opposed to dying from cancer or heart disease? Does the hospital benefit monetarily?
In most cases, no.
In any way. So would you say most cases, but in any way?
There are some countries where you have to report things to bodies which pay you when you've reported it. And it's more like paying people for their time for filling out all the paperwork that goes with it. I think another of the things with this situation, G-Mann, is that it's a bad situation and it's been hijacked by politicians, anti-vaxxers, conspiracy theorists. Everybody with an alternative viewpoint on something is hijacking the situation to their own ends. And that's what's putting out all of this viral stuff on YouTube, on the internet. A lot of it is totally unfactual. It's scaring people unnecessarily, but people are bending a situation to their ideals. And I think this is a bad situation. It's being hijacked by a lot of different people. If you look at, if you talk to a scientist, if you talk to me, I'll say, if somebody has researched something, written a research paper that's in a reputable journal, it's been peer reviewed, I'll accept that that was valid research. But now you have somebody making YouTube videos with nothing to back up what they're saying.
Is Fauci,
that's what worries me.
Is Fauci credible and reputable in your eyes?
Is who, sorry?
Fauci.
Yes.
He's credible and reputable in your eyes.
He has, Fauci has put out reputable papers.
Okay, is Bill Gates...
I would trust Fauci more than quite a few people that I'm seeing posts from at the moment whose work has been discredited in the past. Or who fudged data on their papers and had to retract them.
Is Bill Gates reputable and credible in your eyes? Would you listen to him?
I have reservations about Bill Gates, but that's my personal reservations.
Is it a money trail?
No, I don't think so.
You think none of this has anything to do with lining the pockets of big pharma?
No, and I think, again, we're getting down what people have as a perception of pharma. People don't understand how much it costs to make a drug. If I said to you, how much does it cost to get a new drug on the market? I mean, I've done this talk to year 11, year 12s in schools. I go and give them career talks on, careers in research, medical research, clinical research, and things like this. And one of the first questions is, everybody only hears about the money that farmers make. What they're forgetting is how much it costs to develop the drugs. The average cost is anything between 1 in 3 billion to put a new drug on the market.
So may I ask you, if 60%, I can just jump in there?
40% of those drugs won't get on the market.
I understand. Yeah, I totally understand. I get that. May I just ask you, so the reports that I'm reading, and I think Tom also wrote this down, is that the reports that I'm reading is that hospitals get more money for a COVID death than what they do for any other death.
Probably due to the amount of paperwork they would have to fill out for the bodies that pay them.
So that's a yes. So that's a yes. So hospitals actually do get more money because there's a little bit more paperwork to do than what they would if they were to say, yeah, the person died of lung cancer, skin cancer, nose cancer.
It depends on the health authority, what they have to report. Different countries, different states have different reporting systems, and they pay people differently for what work they have to do.
Do you believe Boris Johnson was on a ventilator?
Sorry?
Do you believe that Boris Johnson was on a ventilator?
No.
Oh, so that was a false report?
I don't think he needed a ventilator. I did not hear that he was on a ventilator.
Do you think he had COVID-19?
Yes.
Oh, so he had COVID-19, but the report was that he was on a ventilator.
No, he was in intensive care for 3 days, I believe.
He looks mighty
One of
fine
my
for a
personal
person
friends was in. One of my personal friends.
He looks mighty fine for a person that came out of intensive care. Man, if I came out of intensive care and then 3 days later I'm addressing the public, he looks pretty cool. He looks pretty good. I wish I could do that. This is why I think people are really skeptical.
Yeah. No, one of my friends has been in intensive care. He had COVID-19. He was in hospital for 3 weeks. He was in intensive care for 2 weeks, but he didn't need ventilating. There's even a picture of him in the Plymouth Evening Herald in the UK in his intensive care bed with 2 nurses. They pushed him out into the garden for fresh air in all their PPE gear. But yeah, he came out of hospital and he was fine within about 1 or 2 days. This doesn't necessarily mean that it maybe makes people feel weak, but how people react is something you can't tell.
Arthur, can I bring you into the conversation? You've written a couple of things. What would you like to add?
Well, one thing I just wanted to say to I've just looked on my phone and apparently GlaxoSmithKline's profits last year were up 34% to 5.48 billion. So even though they have got to lay a bit of money out, they are getting plenty back. But the question I wanted to ask, I've been locked down for nearly 7 weeks, whatever it seems like a world apart, but I haven't come into contact with any health workers at all. And there's one question I'd like to ask Kate, because she seems to know what she's talking about, is does she think that the mass vaccination of the entire population is warranted?
H, would you like to respond to that? Because I heard you say something about the skeptics, the conspiracy theorists, and also the anti-vaxxers, the 3 categories that you mentioned. How would you like to respond to that?
My response is that vaccination is a personal choice. I don't get the flu vaccines because I don't particularly, I can react to the egg protein that's in them. But, I don't feel that I need the flu vaccine. I'm about the same age as you, G-Mann. Cool. You make a personal decision on vaccination. But the problem with COVID-19 is, of course, there's nothing at the moment that can protect, as I say, the medical staff. We do need to get a vaccine there to protect our frontline workers. For the masses, I think it's going to be, a choice as to whether you have it, but I don't think we will be rid of it until we have herd immunity. And herd immunity is, you get it either from catching the disease and recovering or for immunization. What will happen, they have to open up. With viral outbreaks, you have containment, then you have control, and then you have, hopefully, something that you can treat the virus with. So the world has gone through the lockdown, which is the containment. Now they're looking at control. Let's start moving people around and watch the figures. Are we still in control of the virus? More people will get it as we move around. But we should be able to keep it under control if the hospitals are not overwhelmed. Luckily, here in Australia, we've dodged a bullet big time because they slammed the door so fast. Taiwan did, Hong Kong did. They shut the doors really fast.
Do you think the weather has anything to do with it? Do you think our warmer weather doesn't warm or doesn't heat kill the virus? So do you think
there's 2 reasons why warmer climates do, but that's the thought that if it's cold, you stay indoors with a lot of people and you pass it on and you don't have the windows open, so you're more likely to breathe in particles from other people. The other thing is that if you are in a warmer climate, there is a theory, it's never been proved, but it seems to be theoretical, that because it's carried on droplets, the droplets evaporate faster in heat. Therefore, the virus, can't spread as fast. But it would be worth somebody doing research, swabbing around people's feet and see if you get the virus from there, but I haven't seen anybody do that yet.
Tom, can I add you back into the conversation? Then I'll go back to Jeff and then over to Arthur.
Yeah, I was going to ask, our governor was like, we need 30,000 ventilators for everybody to survive, or people are going to be dying left and right. But H, you seem to have a pretty good knowledge of this. is the ventilators like truly helping? Like how many of the patients that you know are definitely needing it? Does every person who comes in need to be put on a ventilator? Because it just seemed like 30,000 just for my state seemed like an awful large number.
Okay, so what you need to remember is, I think I said, they made predictions in a panic at the beginning of March. And the reason for that was, if it had continued, I think there was, they said there would be 1 million cases worldwide by the 1st of April. There would be 10 million by mid-April, 100 million at the beginning of May, and 1 billion by the end if they didn't do something. The projections were actually correct, because when it got to the 1st of April, they were at 940,000. But everybody clamped down in March, so those figures have not gone up. This is a containment phase. About 5 to 10% of the people who went to hospital need ventilation. Well, 5 to 10% of the people who get COVID-19 end up in hospital. And of those, about 3 would need ventilation. Now, if they were projecting that we're going to have all these cases, we're going to need this phenomenal number of ventilators. Italy's problem was Italy got this very quickly. Their hospitals were swamped. They had like 600 patients in Cremona Hospital needing 12 ventilators. And the rest of the world saw what was happening in Italy and panicked. Because they've locked down, they now don't need those. But around 3% of the people with COVID-19 require ventilation. They just cannot breathe to get enough air into their lungs. It's like if you get a sponge, your lungs are like sponges. If they're full of water and you get a heavy sponge, you know what it's like. It's just disgusting. That's what lungs are like. They need oxygen pushed in. A lot of those people who are in intensive care, like Boris Johnson, just needed oxygen to be pushed through their noses to get their saturation levels up.
Yeah, I still don't understand why they would lie about him being on a ventilator. And I think this is why people, like you said, he just needed to have oxygen. But why they would lie, come out, and this is the problem with the media, is that they like to exaggerate and sensationalize things to make us feel like that there is somebody of a higher power, like the Prime Minister of the UK is on a ventilator, so we should all heed the warnings. If I can bring Jeff back into the conversation, what would you like to add?
So my question is for H, I guess that's how you say your name. I'm sorry. You keep rattling off numbers and statistics, and you say that 3% of those people, did you say hospitalized or need to be on a ventilator? Either way, you keep rattling them off. So in my county, there are, I believe, about 3,000 people who have it. So out of 3,000 people, only a handful need to. That's what I'm saying is that the numbers make a big deal when you say of the people who have it, the 3%. Yes, okay, that's a big number. But when you add it to the people who are at 3% of the people who actually have it, it's actually a very, very small number. And that's what I'm trying to ask is why does everybody keep saying, well, if you have it, it's 3%, and everybody looks at it and says, well, that's 3% a big number comparatively speaking, but it all depends on the way you look at it. And why are we in a mass panic over, 50 people? I don't understand that. And that's what I don't get is why are we rattling off statistics, scaring the crap out of everybody saying, 10% of the population who get it need to be hospitalized. 3% need to go on a ventilator. Okay, but that's only out of the 2,000 people out of a 150,000 population. You're looking at
good points. I can see.
Population.
I can hear the frustration in your voice, and I think that's a frustration in everyone's voice. Is that we go on numbers? It's like Bitcoin, isn't it? We look at Bitcoin, and Bitcoin was the thing, wasn't it? And then all of a sudden it got to its peak, and then it just dropped, and we just went, what happened there? The numbers, the projection. We were all supposed to be millionaires with Bitcoin, and then all of a sudden it's a non-event. Arthur, let me bring you back into the conversation. You wanted to add something?
Yes, I was going to ask H another question, but I think she's been picked on enough tonight, so I'm going to leave her alone.
I'm sure I'm sure she's actually happy to answer them. This is what we need. We
Well,
ask for the people.
I already asked her I did already ask her the question if she thought the mass vaccination of the entire population was needed, and she answered it very succinctly. Sorry, I've had half a bottle of wine, but there you go. It's not 7 o'clock in the morning over here. I just think that everything is being pushed towards this vaccination, and I think she's dead right that all these vaccinations are a personal choice, but it's going to get to the point, they're already hinting now, that if you've not got the vaccination, you won't be able to fly, and you won't be able to go to a mass gathering like a football match or something like that. And perhaps if there's not a mass vaccination, the football and that won't start again, you know what I mean? So even though it is a personal choice, and it should be a personal choice, we're going to be eased towards a choice, if you see what I mean.
Andrew, I've just noticed in your comments, Andrew, that you said that your parents who work in a hospital told you that the ventilators were the preferred respirator machine because the ventilator is a closed system, and CPAPs are non-invasive, but they're an open system, which means that it outputs the contents of the lungs into the atmosphere.
Ventilators have been the preferred choice because it helps reduce the risk to healthcare workers. Unfortunately, it's the more invasive system because it's where I believe they actually put the tube down your lungs, whereas a CPAP is you just have that face mask. And so when you have just that face mask, it's not entirely sealed, so it has the potential for things to seep out of the mask. The system also will cycle the air from the room into the person, so and then back out into the local atmosphere. Whereas ventilators are, it takes the air out of the lungs, it cleanses it, and then it either, I don't know if it disperses it or how that works specifically, but it's how it was explained to me is that it's a closed system, and so it reduces the risk of potentially spreading COVID.